My name is Pam Thornton, and I'm director of the Chappaqua Library, and we're happy to be here at Chappaqua this evening. Tonight, we're honored to have two amazing leaders and role models. Cecile Richards is a nationally respected leader in the field of women's health, reproductive rights, and social change. She began her career helping garment workers, hotel workers, and nursing home aides fight for better wages and working conditions. After years in the labor movement, she moved back home to Texas to help elect the state's first Democratic woman governor, her mother, Ann Richards. Woo! She went on to start her own grassroots organizations and later served as Deputy Chief of Staff to House Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi. In 2011 and 12, she was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Richards is the former president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, and is a frequent speaker and commentator on issues related to women's rights and activism. Our moderator for this evening, Hillary Rodham Clinton, has a long career of civic engagement as a politician, First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State. She's a passionate supporter of human rights, women's rights, and equal rights. In 2017, after her campaign to become President of the United States, she founded a group called Onward Together, which encourages the civil engagement of young leaders to organize, get involved, and run for office. She is also a best-selling author, a local author, whose titles include It Takes a Village and Other Lessons Children Teach Us, Hard Choices, and What Happened, which chronicled her 2016 campaign for president, a more popular candidate as ever there was one. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Cecile Richards and Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Hello. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, it's great to hold this event in the new Chappaqua Performing Arts Center. I think it's a great addition to Chappaqua, and I want to thank Pam Thornton and the library for helping put this on and sponsoring it. Thank you very much, Pam. And to all of you who are here, not a seat left for this conversation. You know, I am absolutely delighted to be the one lucky enough to ask some questions and share some observations with Cecile. I highly recommend her book, Make Trouble. It's a great read. I love the words on the top, standing up, speaking out, and finding the courage to lead. That's true right now for everyone. And so I thank her for really telling her story, but in a way that inspires, I think, others to think about what each of us can do. And so, welcome to Chappaqua.
I love it here.
Now I know why you live here.
Yes.
So many nice people.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah, it's great.
We love it. And we're a little tired of the rain, but it is, it's a beautiful place with a lot of wonderful people. We have a lot to cover there's so much to talk about, and I've usually been on the receiving end of questions. Some better than others, I will tell you. But I have thought a lot about what I could ask Cecile, but I want to tell her and tell all of you, whatever direction you want to take this in, whatever you want to talk about, this group here is going to be interested, because we are excited to have you here and really to celebrate your leadership, which has been so extraordinary. Now, you know, I recently wrote a book, as Pam said, and it wasn't easy to do, and I really found it to be a kind of cathartic, challenging, but ultimately rewarding experience. And one of the best parts was traveling around, talking to people, meeting them, hearing their concerns and their questions. And I wanted to ask you, what's it been like being on this book tour? Because your book came out and you've been all over the country. And what have you heard? What have you seen? What have you felt about all of the encounters and the events that you've had?
So, well, first, thank you for writing your book, because it was cathartic for all of us who, it was so important, and you were so personal in it, and talked about all the things that we'd all lived through in one way or the other. So I appreciate that, and I think it is an important time for us to all tell these stories so that we can, move on and do more. The book tour has been fantastic, but it's been less like a book tour, more like tent revivals around the country. I think, and I know, I'm so curious what you're seeing, because I know you're speaking everywhere. I've been an organizer my whole life. I have never seen the outpouring of just grassroots organizing, people not waiting for instructions, not waiting for someone to ask them to do something, and they're showing up at these book events to talk about the book, but also just to talk about, which the theme of the book really is about, okay, what do we do in this time? And it's been incredibly inspiring. And not just the usual suspects. I think, there are folks like us who've probably been doing this more or less all our lives, but I'm meeting women in their 80s who've never volunteered for anything that are now showing up at Planned Parenthood health centers and volunteering every week. And young women in their teens who are absolutely on fire. So it's been really, even in the wake of this disastrous presidency, and we don't have to go there too deeply, but it's just been, I think people have had the opposite reaction than I think some people expected. That they, not only were the women's marches obviously the largest marches in the history of the United States of America, which is great, but people could have just taken their hats off and gone home, but in fact they kept going. So that's what I've been seeing.
I have to say, one of the parts of your book that I really laughed out loud over was your determination to knit your own pussy hat.
That's what we do, right? If we don't know how to do it, we learn, and it wasn't pretty, but I did it, yeah.
I just love that, because eventually you had to go seek expert help at a knitting shop, as I recall, right?
I did, but again, there's probably some folks here that knitted their own pussy hat, yeah, exactly. But yes, I arrived in the knitting shop, frantic, because I only had a couple of days left, and the march was coming, and there was more pink yarn than the eye could see. And then, the minute I got in there, women they're trading hats, they're trading ideas, they've got their daughters, they're teaching their daughters to knit. I think it was really somewhat a metaphor for what we're seeing. It's just women coming together and doing extraordinary things like knitting a hat. Yeah.
Well, but I find that really gratifying. There's a beginning and an end,
Exactly.
and you just keep going, and then you go on to the next thing. In this book, there's so many great stories, and I want to cover as much ground as possible, but one that really struck me was how, when you were invited for the interview for the job to be president of Planned Parenthood, you almost didn't go. And the way it comes across in the book is, well, you weren't sure, you either wanted it or you could get it, you were kind of, up in the air about it. And you know, it struck me that still for a lot of women, and I see a lot of young women, when they're asked to apply for a job or take on some new responsibility, they're also up in the air. They're not sure. And so tell us a little bit about your experience, but also then you became the leader for, what, 12 years of this very important 100-year-old organization. And you had a lot of women and a lot of young women working across the country. So talk a little bit about your journey and then how you try to encourage more women to take on more responsibility.
Well, it's funny because I know you write about it in your book too. Just this, as women, a lot of times, this is really what happened to me when they called and asked me to interview. I was just, of course, like what, me? And so, of course, I had all the reasons why I wasn't qualified. I'd never done a job like this. I'd never taken on any, I was sort of used to running these scrappy nonprofits, and Planned Parenthood was like, oh my gosh. So I really was like this close to not going to the interview. And I stopped at a coffee shop and I did what any grown woman would do, is I called my mother and I said, Mom, I just don't, I don't think I can do this, and the kids are too young or too, this and that. And she just said, I don't know if you ever met my mother, Ann Richards, but she was just like, she was not having it. She just said, Cecile, get it together. This is the most important opportunity of your lifetime. You will never forgive yourself if you don't take that chance. And what's the worst thing that could happen? And she used to always say that, which I think was really helpful, because I think as women, we start projecting all the things that are going to happen rather than just doing the next thing. And so I mean, and of course, many of you know my mom got sick right after that, and she didn't even live till the end of the year. So in many ways, it was like the last gift my mother gave me was to get me to go to that interview at Planned Parenthood, and I am so grateful to her. I carry her with me every day, wearing her pin, my sheriff's badge that was hers. So I'm grateful that she did that, and that was Mom's attitude, which is, this is the only life you have, so do it now. And no regrets. I do think, though, that to your other point, and we have so many incredible people that work at Planned Parenthood. Many of them are here, so if I could just shout out the folks who go to work at Planned Parenthood. So amazing, fearless. And I think you've had the same experience. I've had so many women, brilliant, talented, ambitious. And when they're offered a new job or a raise or a promotion, they're like, I remember this one woman, she said, I haven't finished my PhD yet. I really just don't think. And I have never had a man in my entire lifetime say, I just don't think I'm ready for that new opportunity. So this is a time, I think, for women, right? I mean, you're smiling because I know you've seen it too, right?
I've lived it and I've seen it. Yeah. No, I know. I mean, of all of the young women that I've hired and promoted and have worked for me over the years, and all the young men who I'm equally fond of, you're absolutely right. I mean, you ask a young woman, or you tell her, look, I think you can take on more responsibility. I'd like to see you try this. And the first 5 minutes are all the reasons why that's not a good idea. With a young man, it's like, well, what took you so long? And so, did you ever use the words that your mother told you, like, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Absolutely. And I mean, for my own daughters, and for other women that I meet, because I do think, and that's, I think, what we're seeing in these book events is that's mainly what women are asking is, okay, what should I do? And I think in some ways this is a moment where, and again, I think there's a lot of Ann Richards, sprinkled throughout the book, but I do think she waited a long time before she got to actually kind of be liberated. I mean, people say, what was it like to have Ann Richards as a mother? And for most of my life, she was just my mother. Honestly, she was a housewife, we called it in the day, and you know the background. And it wasn't until much later that she actually got to, kind of, the women's movement came along and she just lost her mind. It was just like, no going back. So she was so impatient for women to not wait their turn, not wait to be asked. And I think this is a moment right now in this country. If there were ever a moment for women not to wait to be asked, this is it.
Amen. I agree with that. Let's talk a little bit more about your mom, because she was hugely influential to so many of us. And one of the many pieces of her advice that you share in the book, which when I mention it to you, you will know that it came as something of a bolt to me. Her advice was, if you're going to be a woman in the public eye, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble if you pick a hairstyle and stick with it.
I think she gave you that advice.
Yeah.
Now you know how I feel. Right, exactly. Yeah, she had a lot of opinions, but generally pretty practical, good advice. And that was a frustrating thing. She had a lot of opinions, and they were usually correct. So it was like better to go along with them.
Yeah, just say yes, because you're going to get there anyway.
Exactly.
Well, she was, someone who obviously inspired you, as she did so many others. And it was interesting in your book where, when you had two very active parents. Your father was a very active civil rights lawyer, involved in all kinds of things. Your mom ended up running for office, became a county commissioner. So when you became old enough to go to college, you decided to go far away, spread your own wings, and off you went to Brown. But you were at Brown only for a year, right? And then you decided you had to go be an activist yourself, and then eventually came back. But talk a little bit about how you found your own path. Similar to your parents' values and ideals and activism, but you really made it your own and ended up being a labor organizer.
Right. Which was not the career path that most Brown University graduates took. In fact, there was no one recruiting for labor organizers when I was at school. But it was funny to go away. I'd never really been out of Texas much, and those were not the days when people took their kids and looked at colleges. I mean, my father still never been to Rhode Island, so it was really like just cold turkey. You're out there on your own, and it took a while for me to find my sort of fellow troublemakers, I guess. But it was at Brown. One, I got an excellent education, so if anyone's thinking of going to Brown, it's an incredible school. But it was also a place where I learned to really kind of question authority. There was a janitor's strike that I got really involved in. There was the move to divest from South Africa, and at the time, that was unheard of. And it's really interesting, I think, as a social justice organizer, and the work that we all are in, is that you begin to realize that justice doesn't come immediately. It can be a long haul. And one of my best experiences actually was at Brown. When we fought to divest from South Africa. In fact, I didn't even go to the graduation because someone had to unfurl the banner from, divest from South Africa from the second floor window, and it seemed like, why not me? But the good thing is, even then, and I remember that they thought we were crazy. I mean, the administration, this is never going to happen. Well, of course, Brown became one of the first universities to divest from South Africa. That movement became incredibly important, actually, in the international movement. To change what was going on in the apartheid government. And 30 years later, they gave Nelson Mandela an honorary degree. So it's just one of those things where you think, and I know a lot of times people now, they want to know what to do because they think if they could just do one thing, it would somehow all be better. That was certainly, I know you heard that all the time after the election. And sometimes you don't know exactly what the impact will be, but you just have to kind of keep doing the right thing. And as we know, the arc of history sort of bends towards justice, but sometimes it takes a long time.
I think that's a really important message, that yes, you don't know that an action you start today is going to have the result that you hope for and even expect right away. And in fact, there are a lot of setbacks and so many challenges. And because you decided when you graduated from Brown that you were going to be a full-time organizer, you really decided that was your mission, your purpose. And I think that's more important than the short-term goals that you're trying to set. If look, I want to be on the side of justice, I want to be on the side of people who need their voices heard. And there are such really great stories in your book about organizing, not starting with janitors at Brown, but going on and nursing home workers, and then in East Texas, which was not an easy place to organize. And you met with them in living rooms and truck stops everywhere. But the stories you tell and the really vivid portrayals you give of these hardworking people who get up every day and they do the jobs that we all take for granted and need done, but which we don't particularly value, and we don't treat the people who do them with the dignity that they deserve. So kind of run through some of your organizing experiences from East Texas to LA.
Well, I think and again, I just feel like we, knowing your history and having read all that you've been involved in, I mean, we do come out of this same area of the country where there are folks just struggling to make a living and to make it by. And so I did start in southern Texas, where I know you and the president spent time registering voters, and still there's a lot that hasn't been done. And as we know, under this current governor in Texas, things aren't getting better. But it was, organizing garment workers, spending time with the hotel workers in New Orleans, women working for the minimum wage, working 2 shifts just to try to, keep their families together. East Texas, African American women in East Texas were the only jobs you could really get were the nursing home, or if Walmart opened up, maybe there. And yet these women, they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And yet they were willing to take the risk to even lose that job to fight for something better for themselves and their families and their communities. And that was so inspiring. And so sometimes now, in the work I do at Planned Parenthood, and actually it's a lot of the same women that depend on Planned Parenthood. So I feel like my life has come full circle in many ways, which is why Congress is, sorry, I don't mean to keep getting political, but I just want to say to them, women don't come to Planned Parenthood to make a political statement. They come because they need affordable health care. And in many parts of the country, Planned Parenthood's it. That's the only thing they got. And so, but I realize every day what a privilege I have had to be a troublemaker, if you will, if that's my career, because a lot of folks don't get to choose what they do for a living. Most of this country, they don't get to choose. We get to choose, the folks in this room, for the most part. And so I think it's also helped me, one, to recognize that privilege, and also recognize the obligation that I think we all have to do more than we're doing. That's just the bottom line truth right now. And as my friend Lauren Peterson, the co-author of this, says, if you're not scaring yourself, you're probably not doing enough right now. And so I think it is, but it's not just an eat your spinach book, and I hope one of the things that comes out of this is being involved in social change, being involved in historic, elections and opportunities and campaigns can be, not only it can change the world, it'll change your life, because you will meet the most amazing people along the path.
Well, and one of the people you met is your husband.
I know.
I
Isn't
know.
that so fantastic?
Yes, and you all, just reading this book, you had so much fun. I mean, there you were fighting every day to try to get more pay and more and safer working conditions for hotel workers in New Orleans, or for nursing home workers in East Texas, or for janitors in LA. But you were having fun. I mean, you lived in these little tiny rented houses. I think one of them, you moved in East Texas, and some neighbors came over and said, "Thank goodness." What did they tell you?
Oh my God, I don't know if you've ever been to Tyler, Texas, but no, Kirk and I drove up, we had the van packed with all our worldly possessions. We moved in, and the couple next door came and brought us some Tyler roses, which was sort of the thing to do. And they said, "We're so glad that you moved in, because there has been a Negro family that had been living there before you were." And little did they know that our house/union organizing center became the gathering spot for every African American woman in Tyler, Texas. And so it was, but I love that story.
And also, just the partnership that you and Kirk had from the very moment that you began working together, I guess, in New Orleans, or was it in Washington?
It was in New Orleans, right?
Yeah. I love the the setting of the scene where you're trying to raise money for your organizing effort, and you're going around selling fried fish sandwiches or dinners?
We did everything. We did anything. Yeah, and that's what I said. Wait, boy, once you sold fried fish suppers for a living, you'll never starve. You can always make a living. But Kirk was great. Kirk's here tonight, actually, and he's kind of the hero of this whole book. So thank you, Kirk. In fact, Gail King was like, Kirk, I like Kirk. She interviewed me, read the book. She said, I want to meet Kirk. So anyway, it's become kind of famous.
Kirk has to write his own book, you know.
That's true. That's a good idea.
But then you went to LA, and it was a bit of a culture shock between East Texas and New Orleans and LA. But the problems were the same, weren't they? I mean, the same kind of issues. Huge skyscrapers in Houston.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles.
Essentially being cleaned by immigrant janitors,
right,
who, many of whom had, their stories of getting to the United States just to try to make something better of their lives, and how frightening what they had been through, just to get to LA, and then they're working at minimum wage. And of course, for women, working nights in these buildings was terrible. And yet they were willing to risk all that to organize. And of course, they sent half their paycheck back home to wherever their family, or what other country their family were living in. But that was one of those examples of where it was a great organizing example, because we actually organized all of downtown Los Angeles, and then eventually Century City, and now all the janitors in that city that work in these big buildings earn a living wage with full benefits, and that would have never happened if folks hadn't organized. But if I could just to say, it's why, working with immigrants, which I did for a long time, every single day, to see what is being said about immigrants is so wrong, and not just heartbreaking, it is maddening. Because as we know, in most parts of the country, immigrants do work that no one else will do. And they have built this country and continue to do it every day, and they deserve better from us.
That's becoming clearer, because I've been, as you might guess, following this, and you have a lot of agricultural groups, including, as I recently saw the Ag Commissioner of Texas begging for more workers, because a lot of their traditional, seasonal, or even year-round workers have fled or been deported. And we have crops rotting in the fields in California. So just take that one sector of our economy, and food has been relatively inexpensive in the United States compared to the rest of the world. And we are making it more and more expensive while losing a lot of the people with the expertise and experience to do the work. And then you can go into other industries and basically find the same. Well, now, your daughter, Lily, was born when you were in LA. That's what I thought. So you have 3 kids. You want to tell everybody about your 3 wonderful kids?
Sure. So there's Lily, the first grandchild. So she was Ann Richards, Ann Richards loved this little girl. And I feel like I was just a genetic connection between Ann Richards and Lily Adams. So, and of course she's gotten to do a lot of campaign work, worked on for a lot of amazing people, but nothing touched getting to work for you in your campaign. It just changed her life. And then twins, Hannah and Daniel, and they're also both troublemakers in their own way. Daniel's a chemistry student, and Hannah's an organizer, and I'm very, very blessed, very, very lucky.
Well, obviously, I've gotten to know Lily really well, because she did work for me, and you and I share the Lily connection and also the Lauren Peterson connection, because Lauren now works for me as well. So we have similar views about really highly qualified, extraordinary young women. So you're in LA, and you and Kirk are working really, really hard organizing janitors, primarily immigrants, when all of a sudden your mother calls you.
I know.
And so what did Ann have to say this time?
Well, Mom had made the Democratic Convention speech in Atlanta, and which some of you may remember. In fact, people stop me all the time they stop me, repeat the lines, and that just sort of wow, her star just went off, and because she was state treasurer of Texas, which is not a big high-profile job. Well, certainly not now. But anyway, she decided she wanted to run for governor, and this was the days when, it was like, I'll come home, It's like, Mom needs you, and we packed up the U-Haul, put Lily in her car seat, and we drove to Texas and helped her become the first woman elected in her own right governor of the state of Texas, and it was awesome.
I particularly loved the stories and the scene setting of that campaign in Texas. It reminded me of my, campaigns, and particularly the campaigns in Arkansas, because there were a lot of county fairs and a lot of special events, watermelon events and pumpkin events and tamale events and just all kinds of events. And
you have not lived until you've been to the Jamboree Fest in Gilmer, right, where they celebrate the yam.
Well, yams are important, but
they just weren't meant to be a corsage. I'm just saying.
But just the stories of being out there day in and day out, often with Lily, and sometimes with your siblings, and just going from place to place. I have to say, that's when campaigning was fun. I really. It's hard to describe because it's now a different beast. But back in those days, back when Ann ran and back when we were going literally from county to county, and even in my first race here in New York, it was so personal. And you got to know people, and you spent time with people, and you looked them in the eye, and they looked you in the eye, and you built a connection. And now, with social media and everything else going on, that has become harder and harder, and I think it has, unfortunately, really undermined our politics. But in that campaign, you and Kirk and your family were just totally focused. And she won, and it was such a great victory, and not only did she win, but she brought the hopes of hundreds of thousands of people literally to Austin when she was sworn in. And she did a great job, but there was one moment that I remembered, and you write about, where she vetoed a bill and she knew it was going to hurt her. What was that?
Well, it's extraordinary now to think about it. So, but there was a bill that allowed folks to carry concealed handguns, and Mom just thought it was wrong. And as she used to say, I don't know a woman who can find her lipstick in her purse, much less a handgun that's going to save her if she's attacked. And but ironically, so she did. She vetoed that bill, and it did cost her. Of course, she was defeated in her reelection by George Bush. But of course, now the state of Texas, folks aren't carrying concealed handguns. They're just carrying guns everywhere. It is so devastating to see what's happened in a relatively short period of time, and that what, frankly, the gun lobby has done. And people ask a lot of times, if there were one thing you could wave a wand and change about in this country, it would be, to me, to get guns, to get rid of this insanity we have about guns and assault weapons everywhere, and get back to common sense gun laws in America.
I think that's a perfect story to illustrate, because this was in the early 90s. This was not 50 years ago. And determined interests, organizations, and individuals on the other side never, ever quit. They were relentless. And I'm hoping that because of the courage and civic involvement of the young Parkland students and others, that we will make common sense gun safety a voting issue. And because the other side, that is their issue, period, bar none. And this audience and the two of us, we care about a lot of things. And as a result, we are not single-minded. And I think we have to take, unfortunately, a lesson from how effective the other side's organizing turned out to be. Well, the next stop on this amazing Making Trouble journey, after you did some work in Texas, helping to organize, again, an activist group, you were off to Washington, and you helped to start an organization called America Votes. What was that?
Well, that was it was a realization that we had that there were all these great organizations in the country, the Sierra Club and Planned Parenthood and Emily's List and the labor movement, but none of them, they actually didn't even know each other. I mean, really, the heads of these organizations, in many cases, had never even met. And the thought was, wow, what if we all sat down at the table and figured out who's registering which voters, who's talking to which voters, and who's turning out which voters? So that instead of everybody talking to the same 5 people, we actually might spread it out. And it was great. It still exists to this day. And it is the one way that, and it's been really interesting to see, because I think, I have had the pleasure and honor of working for Planned Parenthood these 12 years, where we've really built our capacity to work in this arena. But some areas, we're not the best messenger. And so I think one of the things we learned through America Votes is, if in Pittsburgh, it's better for Planned Parenthood folks to volunteer with the steelworkers and go door to door, then that's what we do. And I think it was a strategic move for the progressive community to use their dollars more intelligently, I think, and also to build the kind of relationships that, frankly, today, we really need. I mean, this is the time, I think, more than ever in my lifetime, that people are recognizing that being a single issue group without actually recognizing how all of this how we're all connected together, it's the way we're going to change what's happening in America. So some of those relationships that started at America Votes have continued on to today and have helped, I think, do things like defeat the effort last year to repeal Obamacare.
Well, I know there's so much debate and so much unfair, unjustified attacks on Planned Parenthood. What would you like people in, not just this audience, but people in America, what's the one thing you wish everybody understood about Planned Parenthood?
I guess that we provide health care to about 2.5 million people every year. And for many of those folks, we're their only health care provider. 1 in 5 women in this country have been to Planned Parenthood for health care, including me when I went away to college and had no idea where to go. And for all of the naysayers, including a lot of people that are in Congress right now, we do more at Planned Parenthood to reduce unintended pregnancy than any organization in America, and we do that work every single day. And so for all the, I go to a lot of health centers, and we have folks with picket signs and yelling at women trying to get into a health center. And I just want to roll down the window and say, if you really wanted to reduce abortion in this country, you'd put down your signs and you'd come in and volunteer at Planned Parenthood, because we're doing more to get birth control to women in this country than any other organization in America. So it was like working.
That's what is so frustrating about this debate, because we are, I believe, right now at an all-time low in abortions. We are
Since Roe, that's right.
Since Roe v. Wade. And so we're headed in the right direction. If you don't approve or that's not your choice, then you can say, well, look, what we're doing is, quote, working, even if you are, on the other side. And we also see, unfortunately, though, this attack on Planned Parenthood is an attack on family planning. It is an attack on birth control. And that's what's always boggling the mind, because the folks in Congress that you're referring to, they don't stop with their criticism at their their difference regarding abortion, they go on to try to limit Planned Parenthood's ability to provide cancer screenings, to provide protection and treatment for STDs, for helping women get referrals for all kinds of physical and mental ailments, as well as prescribing birth control. How did this happen, that this became so much of a flashpoint when, again, if you sort of look at the facts and if you really care about these issues, you know, you'd give Planned Parenthood a big vote of confidence?
Well, I think that, as we know, unfortunately, the moderates, Republicans, have been really shut out. And although I just want to say, the big fight over this last year and a half to preserve access to Planned Parenthood and access to the Affordable Care Act, we wouldn't have been able to win that fight without two really brave Republicans, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, and it's really important that we recognize that. I think that the way that this president in particular and his administration is, and frankly, the congressional leaders, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, they are playing to, well, Paul Ryan is retiring, so I'll just say that, but it is incredible to me that, because it's, as you say, it's one thing if they say, well, we're going to try everything we can to, attack abortion, blah, blah, blah. But right now, this administration is trying to take away the right of women to get birth control in their insurance plans by letting your boss decide whether you get birth control, okay? Under Obamacare, we won that for 62 million women in this country, and it has been revolutionary. It's absolutely changed everything. So they're going to do that. They've now, even though we're the lowest rate of teenage pregnancy in the history of the U.S., they're now ending the teen pregnancy prevention program. And most recently, and I think it may be even being announced tonight by the president, who's speaking at a big anti-abortion group, they're now trying to, and I know you're familiar with the global gag rule, because of course we have lived with this when Republicans came in office. This administration is now trying to roll out a domestic gag rule, which would essentially, now, and this is important because everyone in this audience needs to be aware, because this is going to be enormously important. Basically saying, if you provide abortions, you can no longer participate in the family planning program in this country, which, 4 million plus folks do. If you're a doctor, you cannot advise, and you participate in the family planning program, even if you don't perform abortions, you cannot actually refer a patient to an abortion provider. You're gagging medical providers from giving medical advice that is completely legal to their patients. This has never happened in America. And so we have gone so far beyond anything that anyone ever imagined. And the only way we're gonna win this fight is people are gonna have to rise up and say, we are not gonna go to a place where doctors in America cannot take care of women. It's just frightening.
And, they just announced that I guess they're going to try to, well, they'll probably push it through the House, and I don't know what'll happen in the Senate. But as I understand their gag rule, there's not even exceptions for rape or incest.
Well, so we have, it literally is rolling out, because they were going to roll it out Friday, and then, surprise, surprise, they weren't really organized and ready to do it. And so we're literally, right now, even as we were coming on stage, the text is just becoming available. So I don't know the specifics, but it's bad. It's really bad. And the good thing is, docs, physicians groups, they're all opposing this. And so it's going to be important that not only the women's health community, but the medical community rise up and say, we are not going to go to a place where doctors are not allowed to take care of their patients. So we'll get the full details. And if anyone who's interested in this should absolutely go to Planned Parenthood Hudson Peconic, stay in touch with them. They'll be rolling out what's happening, and I think even doing a rally this week. But I mean, this is just, again, this is just women's health, but we could talk about so many examples of an administration that is just going back to, not the 1950s, we're talking like the 1890s. I mean, it is really, it's frightening.
Well, it's part of this all-out assault on facts and evidence and reason. You mentioned teenage pregnancy. Back in the 90s, I helped to start the national campaign to try to curb teen pregnancy. And we tried a lot of different things, and then we got the evidence about what worked. And guess what? Real information to both young women and young men about being responsible and providing, guidance to them, answering their questions, because so many of them had nowhere else to go. You do a lot of that counseling at Planned Parenthood. And the net result is, as you rightly say, we have the lowest rate of teen pregnancy in our recorded country's history. And now they want to basically get rid of all that evidence-based work that has been done over the course of 25 years. And they want to go back to what they call abstinence only, which doesn't work. I mean, if it worked, you could say, okay, well, here's your choice. You can have that evidence-based effective approach or this other evidence-based effective approach. But we know what works with young people. They get so much false information, and they get so much, they are exposed to so much information that is neither reflective of caring, responsible behavior and relationships, or even just basic information. So this is what is so troubling. And as you say, it's not just in this arena, it is across the board. It's ideology is driving policy, not facts, not evidence, not good results and effectiveness. And you probably were in the center of that storm more than anybody else in the country after the election.
Well, but you've been in it too. I mean, in fact, I just have to say, because I don't know if I will have another, some of y'all know I spent a cool 5+ hours in front of one congressional committee, which was unbelievable. But the first call I got when I got out of that hearing was from this woman right here. It meant, and I think that's, it's important to say that because you'll never, that's just what you do. That's just the person you are. You'll never know how much that meant to me. And I do think at this time in which the world feels like it's falling apart in so many ways, it is that connection that we have with each other and that we encourage each other and we stand with each other. We can't underestimate how that's going to help get us through. So anyway, I just want to say thank you for that. And you kicked ass in that hearing. You were amazing. And Jason Chaffetz is retired, right?
I think both of our experiences, dare I say, smacked of sexism. You think? The way that they talked down to you, talked over you, I was watching in real time. And then, of course, my own 11 hours of experience in front of some of the same people that went after you. But, you use the word connection. That's a really important word. So is the word empathy. We've lost either the willingness or the ability to empathize with others and their struggles. And, with respect to Planned Parenthood, I've met so many women across the country who've told me their stories, who told me their incredibly painful, poignant stories. So many of them told me about being diagnosed with cancer. It was the only place they could go. They had no insurance. They made a little too much money for Medicaid. They weren't old enough for Medicare, so Planned Parenthood was the place. And that's where they found out that they needed treatment and were, encouraged and supported as they were referred. Story after story after story. Why is it that we've lost this ability to kind of see each other through the other's eyes? And, your mother was a master at that. You're a master at that. You are able to connect with people and hear their story, and then you go immediately to, like, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to help you or solve the problem? How do we get back to that? That's such an American way of being, and yet we seem to be getting distracted and diverted away from actually working with each other.
Well, no, I think that's, and in fact, I think in that hearing, that was what was the big lightning bolt for me when I sat down, because my first statement was about a woman Dana Ferris in Dallas, who had gotten her, who Harvard graduate, you know, husband lost his job, she wasn't working, and there was no place for her to go but Planned Parenthood. And they literally not only detected her breast cancer, but insisted that she go and get immediate attention, work all the way through her treatment. And I tell this story, which is it's the story that millions of women experience. And I could have been reading Dr. Seuss. They could care less about what was happening to this woman. And I think that is why I do think, and I'm always trying to look at, as an organizer, you're always looking at the opportunity. I think that is why women are organizing like crazy. I think they are concerned, they're desperately concerned about healthcare, they're concerned about their kids, they're concerned about their kids going to school and it being a safe place, they're concerned about taking care of their parents, and I really do believe that women are figuring out that voting is the most important thing they could do to determine the future of this country. So it's, and they know the difference. They know the difference of candidates and elected officials who are just talking, or the ones who are actually listening. And so I think it's important right now we remember the things that have happened since this election. African American women elected a Democratic senator in Alabama. That was unbelievable. And we saw in Virginia, and I know that was a race that you were really involved in. Ralph Northam elected with a 22-point gap with women, the first transgender woman ever elected to the Virginia Assembly, the first Latinas ever elected to the Virginia Assembly. So there's a theme here. I really do believe that women are, they are concerned, they are empathetic, and they are, but as I say, I think it's important. Look, the marches were great, knitting the pussy hat, that was fun, calling Congress, showing up at town hall meetings, but voting, that's the whole deal. That's what we got to get done this November.
Well, and you worked for one of the most effective women in the history of American politics, Nancy Pelosi, and she knows how to count votes, and she knows how to get things done. She is probably responsible more than anybody for the passage of the Affordable Care Act.
I absolutely agree.
She has an extraordinary sense of duty and responsibility. And how long did you work for her?
It was like a hot second. I got there and realized I have no idea what I'm doing, and I am better out in the field. So I worked there almost 2 years, but it was like taking a graduate course in the Hill. It was just the most amazing experience. And I tell that to sometimes young women to say, like, it's okay to take a job and find out it's not the right one for you because you're still going to learn things. And I tell a story in this book about Nancy, and I won't give the whole details here, but I just think she is the most underappreciated leader in Congress. And why is it they're always saying women should retire, right? I was like, okay, I actually think we need more women in Congress, not less. But in any case, there was, during the Affordable Care Act, at that final moment, right, where there weren't the votes. And we had taken a very tough position at Planned Parenthood after a long meeting with our board that if there was an abortion ban in the bill, we would not support it. And we had worked as hard as anybody to get that, to bring this bill to the floor. And I had to go visit with Nancy because I had to tell her, look, I know you worked your heart out on this bill, but if we're not going to be able to support it. And I sat down in her office, and she said, Cecile, I'm glad you're here. We don't have the votes yet for the Affordable Care Act. I'm working it. And I said, well, we're working on it too. But before I could say another word, she said, but I want you to know they're trying to put an abortion ban in this bill. She said, and if there is an abortion ban in the Affordable Care Act, there won't be an Affordable Care Act because I won't pass it. That was Nancy Pelosi. And that was, in fact, and I'll never forget it, Friday night, getting a call from Rosa DeLauro, because she was, in there from the great state of Connecticut, and she called and she said, Cecile, you're not going to believe it. The women, we held our ground and we beat them, and there were men that were willing to throw abortion rights overboard, but Nancy and I and these other women, we stuck and threw our bodies in front of the steamroller, and we beat them. And that is, to me, that's just an example of the kind of leader Nancy Pelosi is.
Well, I have to thank you for the incredible campaigning you did for me all over the country.
It was
And,
the honor of a lifetime.
well, it
Wasn't
was,
it?
I'm very proud of the campaign and very proud of the literally millions and millions of people who helped, who volunteered, who were on the staff. Just an incredible outpouring of effort. And we crossed paths a few times in a few fun and exciting places. And it is so great to see the kind of energy that we saw in that campaign. And that is, it was a lot of women, predominantly, I think, but it was just a great, joyous adventure. And I am very grateful for everybody who was involved. And I well remember the dinner that you write about in the book. We were in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and we were staying at a hotel run by the Kirkwood Community College Hospitality Department. So they had all these students.
It's like you remember everything.
No,
it's amazing.
I
only
went
like
back there.
9,000
I went back there
stops.
like 5 times. It was. I spent a lot of time there, and it was so much fun because the students were the waiters and the maitre d's and all of that, and you and Kirk were with us. So there are just a lot of highlights that I think of seeing you coming through a crowd with your blonde hair, usually somewhere in the distance, making your way forward, and then thank you for speaking at the convention. And
that was an amazing
it
convention.
was an amazing
Yep.
experience. I'm so proud of the convention and what we stood for and all of the positive stories that we told. But you talked, you thought about your mother because you thought about what you should wear. I mean, don't we think about those things all the time? I mean,
Yes.
really. Yeah.
I mean, that was my mother.
I know,
Yes,
I
exactly.
know, and it was great. Well, but we didn't make it, unfortunately, and it was tragic and profoundly sad and terrible for the country. And
But
so,
you got them.
but then afterwards, you were in one of the most unique situations because it wasn't clear how much the campaign of what shall I say, the president now, 45, how much he meant and how much he didn't. I mean, a lot of post-election interviews with people where I didn't think he really meant it, or I just wanted change, or I wanted to shake things up, and all of that kind of conversation. But you got a call not too long after the election, which you write about, and it was before the inauguration. It was, why don't you tell everybody about that? Because it was an incredible story, and I'm so glad you shared it with the public.
So this is the one about getting a call to meet with Ivanka. Sorry, I'm just like having a hard time. Yes, no, I mean, at that point, of course, folks at Planned Parenthood, we were all really worried because, yes, we didn't know, but certainly we knew we had a lot of experience with his running mate, Mike Pence. So, yes, who really had been the architect of trying to defund Planned Parenthood. So we were obviously concerned. So yes, I got a message kind of like in a roundabout way that Ivanka wanted to meet and about Planned Parenthood. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to go. I had already seen what they had done to Vice President Gore, where they supposedly wanted to meet with him about climate change and then just, did everything. Anyway, it was just, there was no trust, right? But I finally decided, look, I've got to go meet. If she wants to meet, that's the only person I can imagine we're going to talk to with this administration that might have an iota of understanding about Planned Parenthood. So anyway, then I found out she was bringing Jared, and so I made Kirk come. I don't know. So thank you, Kirk. So So we went out to some golf course that is apparently owned by the president and in New Jersey, and I said, like, this is what Planned Parenthood does, and this is what it would mean if in fact you defund Planned Parenthood. And again, I think it's really important, maybe just one quick history lesson. Planned Parenthood is not in the federal budget. Would that we were, but we are not, right? We work just like every other hospital and healthcare provider in that women on Medicaid and other public programs come to us for services and we get reimbursed. And so what they...
You don't use any federal money for abortions either.
No, it's illegal and we don't, and it's wrong, and low-income women in this country have suffered as a result for many, many years, but that is in fact the law. And so that's what I explained to Jared and Ivanka. And I said, look, we see 2.5 million patients every year. More than half of our patients come to us through some kind of public program. And this would be devastating. And in a lot of areas, in fact, Paul Ryan's own district, we have 3 health centers in Paul Ryan's district that none of them provide abortion services. They all see women for cancer screenings, birth control, and the rest. Anyway, Jared really took the lead on the meeting. It seemed like he thought Kirk worked for me or something. He was like, well, I've read a lot about your business, and you all run a great business. And he kept looking at Kirk. It was like, no, he's a witness here. He's not not a participant. But basically, and Ivanka said, well, she didn't say much, but she said, my father. I was very disappointed that you didn't say something nice about my father in the election, since he said something good about Planned Parenthood. And I was just in disbelief. I said, well, he did say that we provided health care to a lot of people, and he knew a lot of people had been helped by Planned Parenthood, so I was glad he recognized that. And then he said he was going to defund us. So what part was I supposed to what was the thank you part of that? But anyway, Jared's proposal was that he thought he could work a deal that if we would quit providing abortion services to women in this country, that he would talk to Paul Ryan and maybe get us even more funding than we currently get. And I said, well, that's not going to happen, because we are never going to abandon women and women's right to safe and legal abortion in this country in exchange for money. That's not who we are. It was pretty astounding. He said he would just like to see a headline that said Planned Parenthood quits providing abortions. And I said, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we took our leave, and basically then we went out and beat him. Then we went out and basically folks all around the country rallied, went to town hall meetings, never gave up. And because of really literally hundreds of thousands of people in this country who stood up for Planned Parenthood, including a lot of our patients, our doors are still open all across the United States of America.
So you've been on the road a lot. You've been on the road for 12 years with Planned Parenthood. You were on the road for Obama campaigns, for my campaign, for other people running for office. So I have a few questions about some tips you might have for people on the road. For example, what's your favorite food to eat when you're on the road?
Definitely breakfast tacos. And it's hard to get them, right? Okay, I hear a fan.
Maybe you better tell my friends in Chappaqua what a breakfast taco is.
I know, it's so hard to, you just got to go to Austin and really have a real one. That's all I can say, right? Yeah, it's hard to find good tacos, good tortillas on the road. Road food. It's not. Now, if you're in Texas, it's good because there's a Dairy Queen in every town, so you can get a dip cone anywhere in the state of Texas.
And you're really an ice cream fan.
I'm an ice cream fan, but I'm really a pie fan.
You make pies.
I do make pies. Yes, I'm a pie baker.
And you give a passionate endorsement of butter over lard.
If there's anyone who has not figured out that butter makes a better pie crust, see me afterwards, right?
Well, okay, so you only carry one bag. You never check it. That's a
Never
rule,
check a bag.
right? Okay.
Never check a bag.
So what do you...
Can I hear an amen on that? Never check a bag.
So what are your essentials in that bag? Do you have 2 changes of clothes? How do you do it?
Yeah, well, you got to have a steamer. That's the most important thing.
A portable steamer.
A portable
obviously.
steamer, right. Go anywhere. And what's kind of embarrassing, okay, I'm wearing this pantsuit. It's kind of funny. Navy blue, right? This is actually the pantsuit I wore when we endorsed you, when I met you in New Hampshire. So I don't know, I'm crazy, but it's so meaningful to me. But yeah, navy blue, doesn't wrinkle, never shows dirt, as Mom would say. Although it was kind of alarming at some point. I was wearing navy blue suits so much that I started getting offered discounts at the at the airport. People would say, "Which airline do you work for?" And then it was really bad. One night I was walking down the aisle in the airplane, and some guy stopped me and asked me for a pillow. So you gotta kind of mix it up a little bit. You can't, but yeah.
Well, I told Cecile that I was determined I was going to wear pink, and thankfully it got cool, because this is it. So as you think about the struggle ahead, because you have left Planned Parenthood, but your voice is going to be out there. This book has really given a great deal of insight into what you've done and how you think and kind of your energy to be active and stand up for people. How do you keep going? How do you find the sort of personal resilience? People always ask me that. They always say, well, how do you keep going? And it's kind of a hard question to answer because you just sort of sum it up and keep going. But do you have any other reflections on that?
I mean, I think one thing is sort of like, what's the alternative? And we know what's going to happen if we don't do anything, okay? And that's unacceptable. So in some ways, it's just a big motivator. I do think this is a period of time, though, when we have to take care of each other more, because this is hard. And there are aggressions against not just us, but people we love, immigrant people, LGBTQ people, Muslim people. And so I think it is important to recognize that it's not about me, or it's about a lot of people who are counting on all of us to do more. And that is in some ways very comforting to know that there was a purpose, and that there was an opportunity. I know what I did this last year and a half, which was, because every day we were in this fight with this administration and this Congress, but a friend of mine from Austin who's an organizer said to me something which was really helpful. He said, look, just think about it this way. Every single day that Planned Parenthood's doors stay open, that's about, do the math. And I did the math, and it was something like 8,165 people got health care. And a lot of those folks, if we weren't open, they wouldn't be getting health care. And that was a big motivator for me. And so I think that we all have to pick the small battles we're winning right now and recognize that it's all going to add up to something more. I also think, though, it's important, and this is what I'm so proud of our Planned Parenthood folks that are here. We're not just a healthcare provider, so that was an important part, but we're a movement in this country, right? And so we grew from 3 million supporters when I started. We're now nearly 12 million supporters in the United States of America, which is, not that it's a competition, but that's more than twice the size of the National Rifle Association. If we now get all 12 million of those folks and all the other millions of folks that are concerned about what's going on in this country to organize collectively and exercise our right to vote, we will change the direction of America. And that's what I am keenly focused on in these next few months. And that keeps me going.
Well, it's important to keep going because we also have some real-world examples of what happens if we don't keep going, and probably the most painful of those is in your home state of Texas. Because Texas has done more to defund Planned Parenthood and to shut clinics than any place else in the country right now. And what have we seen? We've seen a significant increase in abortions. We've seen a significant increase in maternal mortality. Women are dying in pregnancy and giving birth in Texas at the rate of a third world country. And so when we talk about this, I mean, obviously, Cecile and I are very passionate about these issues that we care about and that she's been so devoted to. But it's not as though we don't know what the alternative is. And, rural West Texas or, the Valley in South Texas may seem very far away, but that's where you can see the results of these kinds of policies being implemented.
No, that's exactly right. And I mean, it's so hurtful to have to use Texas as a cautionary tale. It's my home state. The rest of my family lives there. But it is an example of what happens when you put politics ahead of people's lives and healthcare. And that is absolutely what's happened in Texas. But it is also a place where people have been amazingly resilient. And so I am so proud of my colleagues down there with Planned Parenthood. Not only have they, continued to stay open, they just opened a new Planned Parenthood, brand new Planned Parenthood Health Center that you can see from the freeway in Waco, Texas, my hometown. And we just started providing transgender services in East Texas. And get this, we opened up online appointment making. And the week we opened those appointments, so that folks could plan ahead, we were booked out for 3 months. Okay, that's the kind of work that's happening. And so I feel like that we know what works. It means getting people health care. Getting people health care without stigma, without shame, without judgment. And I feel like we just have to continue to stay the course. And one last thing on that, because I have been very focused during my time at Planned Parenthood in expanding healthcare in the South, because we know all the healthcare indicators are worse in the southern United States. But one of the last places I got to cut the ribbon on was a new Planned Parenthood Health Center in Charleston, South Carolina, where despite the governor, we just opened a brand new health center that for the first time provides safe and legal abortion and transgender care in Charleston, South Carolina. That to me is, that's what we gotta do. And I think that's what also encourages other people. And I think that we didn't touch on this, but I'll just say, seeing what people are doing, even when they say you can't, which is basically what we've been doing in Texas, South Carolina, Louisiana, seeing the biggest women's marches ever in the history of this country is what inspires other people to take action. And one of those examples to me is seeing women teachers across this country wildcat striking on behalf of themselves and their pupils in a way that is revolutionary and historic. And they are taking courage from what they are seeing other women do. I mean, give it up for the teachers, right? It's just amazing. It's a tough time. I don't want to paint some, beautiful picture. But I do think people are doing things that they never thought possible before, and that's what's going to keep us going.
What a great note to end on, because that is exactly right. And Cecile's story in her book, and I've got so many pages turned down that I don't know why I even bothered, but it is an inspirational story, but it's also a motivational story, because there is something everybody can do. And I think after we stand up, speak out, march, and take action and try to prevent the really negative viewpoints of the Congress getting translated into legislation until we can vote in November. And I think it's fair to say there will be no more important election, because if this election gets the kind of turnout that we usually don't get in midterms, and if we're able to take back one or both houses of Congress, we'll be able to begin to hold accountable this administration and replace members of Congress who lack empathy and really are going along because they're worried about their own political futures as opposed to the future of the country. We will begin to take back the country and begin to see the changes that we should. And one of the people who will help to make that happen is our guest tonight and the author of a really good book that I hope you will all get a chance to read. So let's thank Cecile Richards for making